9/23/2020 to order. Could everyone please do the Pledge of Allegiance with me?
I,
Pledge of Allegiance
Allegiance
to the
to
flag
the flag
of
of
the
the
United
United
States
States of America,
and to the
to the
republic
republic
which is
for which it stands,
one nation,
one nation,
under God,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty
justice,
and justice for all.
Thanks, everyone. Just a little bit of logistics. Um, this meeting is being held in accordance with the Governor of Massachusetts March 12th order, suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, GL Chapter 30A, Section 20. No public attendance will be in person. The public can access this meeting via WebEx technology, and I'll read the link below, or they can access it on the Facebook Live site, which BCAT is graciously providing access to. John Eiler, the vice chair, will monitor the Facebook for any questions from the public. For folks who want to join, they can either view the calendar on the Town of Burlington website and see the join link or the phone number there, but I'll read it on the phone here. The phone number is 408-418-9388, and the access code is 173-133-4810. All right, welcome everyone. We have the town meeting coming up next week. We have 5 financial articles which are under consideration. The first thing that's on the agenda is the public participation. So this would be for anything that's currently not on the warrant article for tonight. Anyone who had public participation? David, your hand's up. Do you have something?
I do not. That must be a mistake.
Okay.
Off now.
All right. So not seeing any public participation, we'll move on to Article 3, the will of Marshall Simons. This is usually our most controversial warrant article.
I move to approve as written in the warrant.
Do I have a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
So I have a motion in a second. Is there any discussion? I did have one question, if nobody else has any discussion. Do we know what the reading of the bill produced this time around?
You're talking about the amount?
The amount, yeah.
It's second reading, so I think it's the same. And it's $67,318.95.
Great, thanks. Any other discussion? Okay, so I will do a roll call. Mike Hardy,
Yes.
Bill Gallagher,
Yes.
Doug Davidson,
Yes.
so Sonia Rollins,
Sonia's muted.
Sonia,
Hello? Yes? Yes.
yes, okay. David Tate,
Yes.
Frank Monaco,
Frank's muted. Frank's muted.
Frank,
He unmuted and then he voted yes, and then he muted again.
you're still muted.
yes.
Thank you.
Sorry for the delay.
No worries. Brad Bond, Brad's muted, I think, as well.
Now he's just quiet. Now he's, Brad? We're not hearing you, Brad.
I think I lip read a yes.
Perhaps a hand signal would be sufficient.
A thumbs up would be good.
There we
Thank
go.
you. I don't see Tom here unless I'm missing him. Tom? Okay. Roger Rees?
Yes,
Jay Cherie? Is Jay Cherie here tonight? Yes.
Yes.
Rob Newfield
Yes.
and John.
Yes.
11 in favor, 0 abstention, or 11-0-0. The motion passes.
Just a quick double check. Are you counting yourself in that vote?
No.
Okay.
Okay. Now I lost my place. Oh, yeah, you know what? Article number 4, amend the FY21 operating budget. David,
Sure, just make sure you can hear me.
I can hear you.
Great. I kind of put this in summary form, so I'll be reading it, and we'll go from there. So proposed is a list. You all received the list of proposed budget cuts for the fiscal 2021 budget. So all of you should have a packet of that. In our Maytown meeting, the administration recommended and we approved the operating budgets as presented at that time. It was uncertain what impact COVID would have on our town's overall financial condition. But they said at that time, once more information was gathered, they would set a plan in place in order to deal with the COVID impact. Frank and I met with the administration, including Paul, John, Gary, and Whitney. The plan was presented at the selectmen's meeting and approved by them. My overall discussion will be our meeting topics. I would ask the chair to allow the administration to make comments and open it up to the committee for discussion. Frank can also add comments as being the other Town Hall 1 meeting member if he feels items discussed should be mentioned. COVID impact has impacted all communities quite hard, and Burlington is no different. In our community, we rely greatly on local receipts, hotel and meal taxes, building fees. These have all been impacted. A bit of good news that was shared was the town has been informed that state aid should remain unchanged. But the impact on local receipts has translated to a deficit anticipated of 2.1 million. Again, understand these are not set numbers. They are estimates based upon what we've seen to date. And they are projected and are estimated, and we are projected at times to make these hard. We have to make the decisions right now on how to make up these differences we can't delay that process. The administration will continue to keep us informed as information becomes available, and we may need to adjust again in January. But for now, we need to prepare for our best educated plan. There are 3 ways we can approach the deficit: raise and appropriate, which is we're setting our tax rate this fall, find a way to fund by raising taxes. We have available funds. Free cash will not be certified for some time, but we finished last fiscal year with around 10, 11 million in free cash and close to 10 million in stabilization. Third part is budget cuts and reduction of expenses. I guess there's a fourth, which we could do a mixture of those, but it was decided that what made the most sense for the town at this moment was to do the budget cuts and reduction in expenses. Raise and appropriate was not deemed the best path for all of us, and the administration didn't want to go through with that. Available funds could be used, but again, consider this: once it's gone, it's gone. We should have a better idea first on the true impact of COVID instead of utilizing our funds for that in order to keep the budgets in place. As painful as cuts can be, the best route is for us to do this now. The administration put their recommendations in cutting the overall budget on the sheets which were distributed. This after thorough discussion with the department heads. The cuts would be equitable across all areas. The 2.1 million has been broken down as follows. 1.4 million in accommodated accounts, with the remaining 700 split between town and schools. We did not meet with anyone from the school departments, and maybe the school subcommittee will talk about their estimated cuts. Their budget, as you know, was voted bottom line, so I'm not sure if a plan has been set as of yet, but they can certainly chime in at the end if there has been any discussion. The summary details the cuts and detail how those cuts are to be achieved. Accommodated accounts, as I said, represents the biggest portion, 1.4 million. 675,000 in OPEB will be cut for this year, meaning we will not be contributing to that. Again, there is no mandate in place to fund OPEB, so that plan is certainly discretionary. You all know my position on OPEB and the importance of funding early. However, we're in special times now. Now doesn't seem the time to make that payment. Debt reduction of 455,000 was another area. Results are not immediately funding some projects, and reduction in interest rates after refinancing some debt that we had back in May. Audit represented 20,000, which we increased this budget in order for some specialty audits. That will be done at some point when we pick up things later. And 250 in health insurance reduction. Overall health insurance is in a good place this year. Not a lot of doctor visits, and overall claims are down. And the plan is in a good financial position. Now the town split of the 350,000 you'll see in the sheets. Without going through each individual one, many departments have retiring personnel that they will not be fulfilling this year or replacing it at reduced hours. Some, like police and DPW, have approved expansions to their FTEs. However, they will not be filling them this year. The library is closing on Sundays, which will allow for savings and a reduction in overtime hours. Some melt has been reduced. All appear manageable at each department for this coming year. Yes, some pain, but that's what's in need right now. I would suggest if anyone has any specific departments that you would like to discuss, you can ask the questions, or we can ask Paul and John to run down the list. Overall, I believe this to be a sound initial step until more information is known. We recognize the shortfall and have addressed the need now. Other decisions may need to be made down the road once more information is determined, but Burlington overall, over the last many years, has positioned itself with good cash reserve and fiscal discipline to get us through this trying time. The subcommittee voted 2-0 in favor of supporting the recommendations.
If I could, Steve, could I just add a couple of things on the top of this?
Yeah, so my plan is I'll let Frank go first, and then I'll let the town side, John and Paul talk, and then I was going to pass it to the school committee and Roger.
Okay, thank you. So this is Frank. All I want to add, I'll make real clear, is that even with the cuts that will match the projected shortfall, which is based on a very short runway of real data, we're still looking at a 5.5% tax increase, which was the plan. And, that gets shared, but nonetheless, it's the full boat on the levy. The second thing I want to point out is that these staffing positions that are going to be held out, particularly DPW and police, those are long-standing hires we've been trying to do. So yet again, we're putting off, increasing headcount where we feel justifiably we need to do it. And in effect, we're getting pretty close to a hiring freeze. We're not replacing attritions, retirements, etc. Pretty much across the board on the town side. So it's a really serious effort to hold costs down with the resources that we have. And when we revisit this in January, we will have significantly more data. I don't think anybody knows what to expect. I think the best we could expect, my personal view, as if the projection is right. But you know, there's a real likelihood it may not. And for that reason, going into this, I was very opposed to using any free cash or stabilization because we just don't know what we're going to need it for. And we've got a good kitty, but you can burn through that pretty quickly. So anything we can do to control expenses and leave our cash reserves alone, in my opinion, is extremely prudent with all these unknowns. Thank you.
John, would you like to go now?
Which John, me or John Miller?
Oh, yeah, John Denizio, sorry.
Okay, thanks. I don't have a whole lot to add to what Frank and Dan said. I think maybe we would look at this a little bit differently if it was going to be if we knew it was going to be a quick turnaround, or we knew that things had already turned around. But given there's so much unknown, I think that's what made us go with the plan we're suggesting now. I see that Paul's back on too, so if he has anything to add, he can add it too.
I would add something if I knew what you guys were talking about. We just got booted off for 2 minutes, so I missed probably the last 2 to 3 minutes.
We are discussing the town side reductions in the operating budget for fiscal 21.
No, thank you, Steve.
And I think Frank and David did a good job summarizing.
Roger.
Just a quick question. When the pages came out with the department changes, the notation FTE obviously means staffing. And I think it was explained that those are all, there aren't actually any layoffs. They're just foregone expansions and retirements. But I wondered what the total count, the FTE count was that is anticipated being reduced.
Roger, I can do that now. I don't have that, but I can figure out head count. Probably not exact FTE right now, but I can get it for you.
Okay, it seemed useful to have a number of how many positions were affected. Thanks.
Roger, do you want to give a report on the school side?
Sure. So the school subcommittee met earlier this evening, and we talked about the reductions to the school department of $350K. And it had come up at the school committee meeting last night. There was quite a bit of willingness to entertain the idea of reductions, but with the fluidity of everything that's going on in the school department and whether things are, where transportation goes and where the hybrid and in-school versus home, there are sort of too many moving parts to actually have any idea where that savings could be gotten from. And so I think there was a general feeling that though the school department can reduce their targets by effectively the 350 for the year, it seemed somewhat unlikely from reading the discussion that they would actually be able to make it to the end of the year without a significant sort of reevaluation of what was really needed to conduct school and to get kids educated and transported to and from and everything. There are just sort of too many unknowns to have any confidence that a particular budget number, especially a reduction, could be held the line. So I think there was also a disappointment that the school department and the school committee was not apprised of the process by which all of this came to pass. I realized that Eric was present during a meeting. So all in all, it's going to hurt. They don't know where.
Thanks, Roger. Is there questions or discussion?
Oh, I guess for the record, the subcommittee did vote for and in favor to support the reductions in good faith.
And I think David said that the town hall one was a 2-0 vote.
Right.
2-0, yep.
Thank you.
By the way, I'm very amazed at the captioning that's going on.
Is that, if that's annoying people, I can turn it off.
I think it's great.
Actually, it came on itself. I'm not sure how to yet. Is there any discussion amongst the board? If not, I would entertain a motion.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
So I have a motion by Sonia,
Second?
a second by a bunch of people. So I'll do a roll call vote. Rob Bond,
Yes.
David Tate,
Yes.
Doug Davidson. Doug?
Yes.
Yes. Frank?
Yes.
Jay Cherie? Jay Cherie? John Eiler?
Yes.
Mike Hardy?
Yes.
Phil Gallagher?
Yes.
Rob Newfield?
Yes.
Roger Riggs?
Yes.
Sonia Rollins?
Yes.
Tom? I don't think Tom is here. No, Tom. And then I will vote yes. $11,000 in favor. So we'll move on to Article 5, which is the transfer from stabilization fund. I think is this being withdrawn?
Hi, Steve. This is John Denizio. The idea is to leave it on there in case at town meeting there's the will of that body to use stabilization fund instead of some of the cuts. There would need to be an article on the warrant. So that's the idea with that just staying on there for that purpose. If Article 4 would have passed as is, Article 5 would not be needed.
Okay. So does the committee need to take a vote on that, Roger? You're muted.
John Denizio, if it's needed, would you expect the amount to be somewhere between 0 and 700,000?
I would expect the amount to be between 0 and 2.1 million, I guess.
Okay. Thanks.
Mr. Chairman, I think if we're going to support the administration's recommendation, we ought to have a vote on whether or not we're supporting that concept.
I think that makes sense. We would, since we voted in support of Article 4, I think that would be our preferred way to meet the reduction. But I would certainly entertain a motion to vote on this article.
Make a motion to approve Article 5 as written.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I'm a little confused.
Right.
How do we vote on something with no money on it?
Are you recommending to vote down Article 5?
Well, it's a positive motion, so if you're in favor of the concept, you vote yes. If you're going to support the administration proposal, you vote no.
I think that makes sense.
So a no vote means that we're in favor of using the Article 4 method as opposed to the stabilization fund. Is that how we're interpreting this?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Steve, this is Frank. I actually have a question. Maybe it's for John or Paul. So the way this article is written, it's only stabilization that could be a offsetting resource to the cuts proposed in Article 4. There are two other things that could happen, not that I expect them, but one never knows. Is there a way for somebody to, on the floor, move to use free cash as an offset to the 2.1?
Not certified.
Frank, we don't have free cash certified.
Correct. Okay. Good. That's the first time I'm glad it isn't. And my second question is, I would assume it's very possible for someone on the floor to amend Article 4 and drop off, well, maybe not, and drop off specific items. In other words, instead of it being 2.1, someone could say, I'm willing to let it be 2 million and let the delta ride into the levy. And that could happen.
Yes. Okay.
All right, so there's nothing we can do about that. So this vote on Article 5 simply gives us a position on whether we're willing to use stabilization at all for any amount. And I suggest we do vote on that.
Thanks, Frank. Any other discussion?
Oh, Steve, this is Brad. John, how does that motion go to the floor? I mean, what does Steve sign to send to town meeting next week?
Well, I think the motion stays as it is without a dollar amount in it. And then Steve would sign to indicate Ways and Means vote on it. I expect we would amend it on the floor if we got a dollar amount. If somebody were to move and have it pass that 200,000 of it come from stabilization, just to pick a number, then we would amend that motion to include that 200,000.
Okay.
Steve, I have a question too.
Okay, go ahead.
So if we were to vote, I guess, vote down Article 5, we're sort of taking away some flexibility on how we're going to potentially fund things, right? Isn't that basically what a no vote sort of indicates, that we're sticking with the funding as we set out in Article 4, but it just seems to me like it's not a bad thing to have another option that's available.
So, Mike, this is John. I think even if Ways and Means, Paul can correct me, I think even if Ways and Means votes unfavorably, it still stays on the warrant and could still be used as it could be either read or withdrawn or postponed.
Yeah, true.
I agree. I would defer to Phil on that.
Paul, I couldn't hear what you said.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. I agree with John's comments, and again, I would, if he defers to me, I would defer to Phil, but that's my understanding of it as well. A negative vote, Ways and Means doesn't include the article.
Yeah, Steve, this is Frank.
John had his, sorry, Frank, John had his hand up before you. And then we'll come to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick one. I think the way I would interpret this, just to respond to Mike, is that a no vote on this means that if something doesn't get cut in Article 4, we're essentially suggesting it should be a tax increase as opposed to a transfer from stabilization. That's how I would interpret it.
Yeah. Frank?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I had discussed at the town hall 1 meeting whether we should withdraw the article, and that would have been the mechanism that took away the ability to get at the free cash. We did not withdraw it, and that was basically what the administration, it's a position they took, that they're giving town meeting the ability to use stabilization as they see fit on the floor. And no matter how we vote, that won't go away. But I do think Ways and Means vote should offer some guidance on how we feel about stabilization right now. That's the first point. And the second point I'd make is the amounts that are in Article 4. There's nothing that says town meeting can't simply say, I'm not going to make that cut. I believe they could reduce the 2.1 cuts to 2 or to 2 something and specify what the intended delta to remain is. So they have the ability to protect things in 2 ways, not cut it or fund it with stabilization. I think they've got plenty of degrees of freedom.
Thanks, Frank. I will before Article 4 make the discussion point around that to make it clear of what the intent between 4 and 5 is. Phil.
It's on the warrant. The stabilization is funded as 0. Regardless of what our recommendation is, it goes to the floor and therefore can be voted on. So if in Article 4 there are amendments which reduce or increase the recommended amount by the administration, those funds can be made up through stabilization if town meeting decides, irrespective of what our recommendation is.
Right. I think yeah, I certainly would stress the fact that we're proponents of the reduction of the operating budget and not touching the stabilization fund, but it is there as a mechanism if town meeting does agree with that. It doesn't agree with our assessment and would rather, with a 2/3 majority, rather support it through stabilization. And then I guess if both Article 4 fail and Article 5 fail, then it ends up at the tax levy, which I don't think any of us want to see it go there.
Paul, could we have a levy recommendation if that does occur? What would the tax rate actually rise if both of them were defeated?
John, Paul?
Well, certainly, we don't have the specifics on that as the values of the properties are still being set. But the tax levy that we're balanced to at present is a substantial tax levy increase just on its own right. So it's about a 5.5%, I believe, on the total tax levy, which does not trickle down to an automatic 5.5% increase on individuals. But if we were to add an additional $2 million to that, I feel like the impact would be substantial.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Any other discussion?
Yeah, Steve, this is Frank. I'm trying to raise my hand here.
Oh, go ahead. You're on camera so I can see it.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I think I don't know where this is going to go. I really don't. But I think we shouldn't get myopic about the fact that whatever the tax increase is, the residential portion of it, sure, if it's a 6% increase, the residential portion is what, 2 something? But taxes are taxes, and our commercial side is going to eventually get slaughtered by this stuff, especially if they have, if we're seeing revenue shortfalls, so are they, big ones. So I think everybody's got to be sensitive to the levy, not just from the point of view of the residential pocket this time around. There's something going on here that's a lot bigger than just the residential tax rate.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would say that my biggest concern is that we don't know what the impact is going into fiscal 22 as to how the appraisals are going to come in, especially given that the restaurants and the hotels have seen their businesses plummet, and a lot of the businesses who have people commuting into town to work in their facilities haven't had that for a significant amount of time. I know more people are starting to return back to work, but I'm really concerned about what that could be for upcoming fiscal 22. Anything else? I think I had a motion and a second to vote on this. Is that correct? Or,
I think so. Yep.
okay, so I'll do a roll call at this time. Brad Bond,
So no.
okay, no. David Tate,
No.
no. Doug Davidson,
No.
Frank,
No.
Jay Cherie, John,
No.
Mike Hardy,
Nope.
Joe Gallagher,
No.
Rob Neufeld,
No.
Roger,
No.
Tanya,
No.
Tom, I don't think is here. I'll vote no as well.
Mr. Chairman, Jaya is there, but she's muted.
Oh, I'm sorry, who's there?
Jaya,
Oh, Jaya?
she's muted.
Jaya, can you hear us?
Now I can. Yes, I vote no.
Thank you. It's 0-12-0. Okay, thank you. We'll move on to Article 6, the 1,4-dioxane legal action funding. Doug?
John or Paul can update if this has changed, but I believe that this is being withdrawn for as a warrant article.
Mr. Chairman, indefinitely postponed.
Indefinitely postponed, okay. That makes that one easy. Article number 7, the department salary for the Director of Equity and Inclusion. Roger, would you like to start?
Sure. So this is a very, an article in which there has been a lot of community interest to fund a director level position. We had a subcommittee meeting. The subcommittee voted in for in favor, no opposed. Just a real quick summary. I know the proponents are going to get a chance to speak, so I won't try to go over all the points. The community has recognized a rather significant issue with respect to diversity, inclusion, and equity. And within the school department, there has been an effort and a subcommittee for many years to organize around addressing the issues and the systemic issues that are on this issue. This particular warrant article was proposed by town meeting members, and based on the community interest, it's been discussed extensively at the school committee with a variety of concerns about what is the right approach to address the underlying systemic issues, and whether the particular proposal, the amount of money that's being put on the table is a combination of, is it enough? Is it at the right time? The school committee members all, and Eric Conti, all expressed significant support for addressing the underlying issues and figuring out a way to support students. In particular, Eric's emphasis was on how do you support students that run into this kind of issue. So the crux of the matter comes down to, from a financial point of view, is one is the wording of the motion. The motion says, I guess there are differing lawyer opinions about the wording of the motion. One says that it is worded specifically for that position and is not a general bottom line change to the school operating budget. The other lawyer position from the town side is, I think, the opposite. That says it is to me, the issue is if it's really just a one-time expense and it doesn't raise the amount of the baseline for next year, then the school budget will have to fund the entire amount for this, in next year's budget without any step up. So there's sort of, there's details of financial numbers that are sort of annoying. Everyone understands that the school budgets are under significant pressure due to COVID and the pandemic accommodations that have had to be made and are still being made to figure out. So as before, the school budget, the costs of educating children and getting them back to be either to school or working from home are not clearly known. So it's not clear that there's any way to make a trade-off of this priority, which is a priority of quite a number of people, versus other things. Without trying to get into the particular issues, which I'm sure will come up in discussion, the subcommittee did support in principle supporting this item. My personal recommendation was that the proponents try to find a way to change the word, amend the article so that it actually did contribute to the school's operating budget baseline for next year, so that they weren't automatically set back quite a bit. There was quite a bit of dispute about what the costs are going to be this going forward, whether, what's the cost of a quote director level position. There was some disagreement about whether that was the right position to fill. So there are quite a number of issues around how it would be implemented. Very few around the question of whether it is needed. And for that, back to you, Steve. Actually, maybe I should ask if anybody else in the subcommittee would care to add anything to that.
John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure if I heard you correctly, Roger. The vote was 3-1 in favor
I'm sorry.
of this.
Yes, correction.
With me being the one, in case anyone's curious.
It was 3 in favor, 1 opposed.
Thank you, John. I don't have anything further, Rob.
No, I don't have anything further. We kicked it around.
Okay, so what I would like to do at this point is introduce Siobhan as the lead proponent for this warrant article to give us a short presentation on this article.
Hi, good day, everyone. I'm Siobhan Wong. I am one of the proponents of this article. I'm from Precinct 4. And Roger, thank you for the excellent summation. You really covered the remarks I wanted to make here quite appropriately. And I'm glad that as a community, we can start the conversation by having a unified agreement of the merits of the position. And so I think some of the conversation relates to why we have taken this atypical approach. And, are we cognizant of the fiscal environment that we are advancing this warrant in? And it is our suggestion that this proactive investment is still a responsible action, even within the context of our fiscal realities. Over the past 7 years, the school committee has really worked in partnership with all of us within the town to really make some nascent attempts to really advance, content when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And since 2016, members of the community have really articulated the rationale for this type of position and sought to elevate it. Yet in the past 2 fiscal years, while the position was under consideration, during the budgetary process, it didn't end up entering the actual final operating budget. And since the public has become aware of this potential article, I have been inundated with people publicly disclosing a lot of unacceptable experiences, patterns of behaviors, and also practices. These revelations are disturbing. And so, we don't want our town to have a reputation for being unresponsive in this area. And I think we also need to make sure that we're not being naive in any type of disregard for the potential liability risks associated with this type of behavior and not really, responding in an adequate, timely, systemic approach. So we know settlements, they can be costly, and we don't want to be in any situation in which we're needing to take action and we're not really in a position of strength. So now we find ourselves at a critical moment where we have, an urgent need that we can't defer the need any longer. So our constituents are really expecting us to be solution oriented and to really leverage the resources that we have appropriately towards areas of high need and where we think we can make an impact. So it's kind of with that spirit of pathfinding that all 5 of us town meeting proponents are here today on behalf of the community to talk about this with you. We know that this is not an inconsequential financial request. And even in the most precarious of situations, we need to make value-based trade-offs, and we are making value-based trade-offs. The town does have means to support this request for bridge funding. The question is, do we have the will to do it at this time? Fulfilling this request is going to ideally provide the schools with flexibility to move towards a more timely response to this critical need. We understand that this is critically important, and so we thank you for your consideration. We hope that you have already gone to the town meeting website where you will get to see the presentation that we deliver via video, where we walk through a little bit about the equity committee. We explain that is representative of a broader way of people in our community. We talk a lot about the evolving equity efforts we've been able to make as a town. We highlight how even the pandemic is exacerbating a lot of existing inequities, and that we need to make sure that even at this time, we need to make this investment. And we try to give some details regarding what some of the aims would be for this type of position moving forward, and to also assure you that we're not the only community that's trying to navigate through this landscape. There are a lot of towns who have hired this type of position, and the equity committee has already been able to consult with many of these respective communities to understand the type of role and to get feedback on how we might be able to move forward in a robust way. If you looked at your backup, you really had a pulse for the action plan and all that that entails. It is the full assertion that in the absence of having a dedicated person with robust expertise in this space, we will not be able to strategically advance those aims. And we are very appreciative of the support of the superintendent and, realizing something that we do need to elevate and trying to find a path forward to staffing this critical role in our schools. And so we're really asking you to vote yes, to consider this as an opportunity to provide our community with this bridge funding to enable the schools to accelerate hiring for this need that we know we need to fulfill. So thank you for those few minutes to make some remarks, Steve.
Thank you, Siobhan. I know Christine from the school committee wanted to give a short message as well. Christine, are you here?
Yes, wait a minute.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm here, Steve. So I think the school committee, there's some disagreement on the school committee. I first had a chance to see the backup this morning, and I think the introduction was a little bit misleading. So I just want to read something I put down. This warrant article was originally brought to the schools as a request for us to put it on the September warrant. The superintendent submitted a placeholder and later brought it to the school committee for discussion. Committee member opinions varied on the approach, the cost, and the timing, but certainly not on the importance. Later, several town meeting members, those who are here tonight, decided to sponsor this article on their own. It then came back to the school committee and was discussed at length at different meetings. Again, opinions varied, and when it became clear that a vote of support would not pass the school committee, as chairman, I decided not to take a vote on the article rather than send a negative vote to town meeting. It is not our article. It is an article put forth by 5 town meeting members, so I felt we were not compelled to vote. There is no question that racial inequity is a problem nationwide, and as diverse a population as Burlington is, racial, religious, and other equity issues do exist. That is unacceptable. Our administrators and teachers work very hard to prevent inequity and take immediate steps to intervene, discipline, and teach whenever problems arise that they are aware of. Certainly, many things happen that school leaders are not aware of. Like any community, we can do more and we want to do more. We want our town and school community to rise above all forms of inequity, whether it be racial, religious, or relating to differences of any kind. The problems school committee members voiced on this article are as follows. Is a director position the best model for solving these issues? Some feel that a director position is the wrong approach. It may make more sense to have diverse staff who work directly with kids, specialists, counselors, social workers, etc., available to handle issues as they arise. A director who makes $140,000 a year, $81,000 is only for a part of a year, and is a high-level administrator will not have that same impact. That person may not work directly with kids and teachers on a daily basis. We are being asked to cut $350,000 from our budget due to a lack of revenue as a result of COVID-19. This warrant article would, if passed, provide $81,000 for a partial year salary for a director, but would not be added to our budget. And that would mean that next year we would need to fund a salary of $140,000 in addition to the $350,000 cut, putting us at a deficit of $490,000 before we even begin budget discussions. We have an entire budget process coming up in a few short months. My goal at that time would be to discuss the best models based on the experiences of other communities and how to handle these very important equity issues. My goal would be to study it, choose a model that works for us, and budget for it. Finally, if town meeting does pass this article, given that the article is for a director, we would have no choice but to adopt that model or not hire anyone. This is based on school council's advice that the article, as written, is not added to our budget and therefore could only be spent on the dictates of the article or not spent at all. Racial inequality is a heartbreaking issue. Although we make every effort to treat it very seriously in our schools, there is always much more that can be done. We are in complete agreement that both locally and nationally efforts must be made to accomplish permanent change. Committee member concerns and hesitations on this article are purely based on finding the most effective remedy and following the correct procedures. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Christine. Discussion from the Ways and Means Committee. John.
Hi. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I've said a bit at the school committee meetings and so on, but everyone may not have seen those. So I just want to at least explain why I gave a no vote on the subcommittee. First off, I guess I would like to distance myself from a lot of the discussion I've seen online that suggests a no vote on this because there's a belief that there's no issue to be dealt with, and I think that's incorrect. I strongly agree that if we look at the demographics of just the employee base for both the schools and the town, we can see that it's not all reflective of what Burlington's demographics are. So that's just one objective data point that suggests that there might be work to be done, at least in the hiring area, for instance. We've heard a lot of examples of issues on the student side also. I'm really disagreeing with this more from a financial financial point of view and a planning point of view. So from a financial point of view, I think Ms. Monaco pointed out, some of the significant issues with the costs associated with the particular approach with putting in a director level position. I think for anyone to be successful in this role, it's got to have the complete support of the school committee, which I don't think is there as demonstrated. What I think would have support of the school committee would be something that is something that they've had a little more input into, that they've had a little more thought about. And I would, personally, I think there's opportunities, given that there's issues on the town side also, of this being much as our HR director is shared between the town and schools. There's that opportunity here. Also, given the realities of where our finances are, I think hiring at this point, particularly a high-level person, has some real issues. And certainly it could be stated this is an emergency and emergency funding should be used. I'm thinking that there are opportunities to leverage some of our senior people now and add this to their portfolio. It doesn't give the full-time position that someone may be looking for at the director level, but it does give that high-level seat at the table where someone could be advocating for it. And that would also allow some of the monies to be used for more direct hands-on people, such as counselors or social workers or people that can directly facilitate the various activities that might want to happen with this program, such as training and so forth. So I want to emphasize that I'm not against the concept of attempting to address this issue, but I do think it needs to be something that's done in a sustainable fashion. I think the worst thing we can do is start this program and then next fiscal year the school committee and administration decides that they just don't have the budget to sustain it in this particular fashion with a high-level director person that has been mandated by this particular approach with the Warren article. So I guess I voted reluctantly no, but I think my goal would be that a sustainable proposal is made as part of the next year, this coming year's budget, so that this is something a program that can be continued and really address the issue for years to come. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Phil?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the most unconventional way to fund the school department that I've ever seen. As we all know, they have fiscal autonomy, and the school department, the school committee is responsible for the operation of the school department, not town meeting. So, in the current conditions, if they thought that this was a very high priority, we're only 1/4 of the year into the budget, they could do that immediately if they chose to, if they thought it was that high a priority. Secondly, I don't think concentration of $140,000, and that's probably not a loaded number when you take into consideration benefits. Dedicating roughly 1.6, 1.7 million over the next 10 years into one position to address these issues within school size, a population size that we have. So I don't think this is the correct approach, but more importantly, I think we have elected school committee members and we have a superintendent and assistant that we recognize as very capable, and I think that this belongs in their pure purview, not in ours. That being said, however, there's also the other factor. Regardless of how we vote or even how town meeting votes, they ultimately will decide how the money is spent. So at this point, I would vote no and send this over to the school committee where it belongs.
Thanks, Phil.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other discussion?
Chairman, if I may.
Sonia and then Doug.
I would concur with the members that have spoken before. I just want to add, I think that I'm not sure that anybody could disagree with the need for a particular position. I would add, and I would ask the committee to think about this. If in fact we're going to talk about somebody who's overseeing diversity, is that not a human resource position? And I think John spoke to this a little bit, but wouldn't that be something that would be held under the HR department? I mean, the fact that the chairman of the school committee is saying that the school committee hasn't taken a position on it, something that needs to be addressed, but clearly we cannot be putting some funding in to a particular position without direction from the school committee of whether they are in fact in favor of doing so or not. So I think when something comes before Ways and Means, we would need to hear from the body that would in fact be pushing it forward. And while I think I commend it and actually completely agree that something like that is needed, we are now coming into a September town meeting. Budgets are going to start within a few months. I would prefer that we put our efforts into discussing if this is in fact something that could come into the next budget. Because right now, allocating $81,000 on a position that will cost more than $81,000 while asking other departments to take their cuts, as well as asking the school committee to take a cut of $350,000. This one pains me a bit because I actually think it's needed, but I think the process of it is a little bit difficult right now. I would ask that if the committee feels strongly that it is only a school committee issue, which I do not believe that to be the case. I think if we're saying this is a community, then the community should be taking it on as an issue. And the community taking on it as an issue means that we should be putting it, in the hands of the Human Resources Department. And however we split that up between town side and school side, we are saying that as a community, we're taking it on if we do something like that. So that would be my recommendation on that, is to ask the group that is bringing this forward to think about that a little bit, think about if it shouldn't be under the HR department, so that we are taking a holistic approach as a town, as opposed to taking it just from the school committee, or rather from the school department's part. But without question, if the school committee has not taken a stance on this, it is hard for us as a financial body to allocate funding when the body that would then have to take it over hasn't taken a definitive stance on it. Again, I commend them for their belief on it. I think we're all in agreement on that, or most of us are in agreement on that. But I would say that they really have to have a definitive stance before we can start allocating funds toward it.
Thanks, Sonia. I see Doug, and then I think Frank wants to speak after that. I see his hand up. Doug?
So Sonia eloquently stole most of my thunder. It's a very difficult discussion to have, because the opposition that I hear and that I feel is to process and procedure, without ever going into the merits or the value. There's obviously been a defined need for change and things to be changed, and I believe in my heart that that's headed in that direction. And the events of the last 6 months have certainly brought it to the forefront, as it should be. I don't believe that this is the way to accomplish it. And both from the standpoint that it doesn't seem to be kind of a well-accepted approach across the board, and also, just the timing for the town and the financial outlook. We're not just talking about the rest of this year, we're talking about next year, and it may echo into the following year. We don't know how this is going to go. I think that we have very well paid staff and faculty and administration. Honestly, some of the things that I've heard, I think there's always two sides to every story, so I'm not calling for anybody's head, but I would say that at some point the people that we have now need to take responsibility for this. And it may not be we need to hire another administrator. We have administrators, and I feel like they have a very clear sense now of the feelings there. And I think that much could be done between now and the next budget cycle to keep heading in the right direction. So I am opposed to this. I am in no way opposed to addressing issues that are being identified and continuing to look at our system. But I'm very uncomfortable with getting into the business of town meeting warrants, then pushing things into a school budget. And I just think that's the wrong way to go.
Frank, did you have your
I
hand up?
do. I do. I actually used the button properly.
Thanks, Doug.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Frank.
Okay. First of all, Chiffon, I really want to thank you. It takes a lot of courage to go through all of this and fight this hard for something like this. And it's an extremely sensitive issue. It's very emotional and it's very real. And we can do a lot better in Burlington. We definitely can, and we have an obligation to do that. My only problem in terms of problems with this is if you go back to our the Ways and Means meeting when we finally voted the budget, I remember Doug saying, so, especially around the warrant articles, Doug said something like, maybe we're not actually understanding how big the storm is coming up out there, and we might be approving things that we're going to regret in terms of, and then it was free cash. It is very atypical for me to be this worried about finances for Burlington because we are a wealthy community. We have a tremendous base of income. But, and to Phil's point, several meetings ago, what's the doomsday scenario in case it turns up? Well, the doomsday scenario is if our commercial base is in trouble, and we don't know really what's going to happen in January, and we don't know what we're going to be dealing with in the next planning budget, and we have to set the targets really in January. So I am loath to burn up any cash whatsoever and to add burden to the operating budget that could result in layoffs. I'm trying, in my mind, fighting with how do we ensure that no matter what happens, we don't have to riff and we don't have to cut badly on services. And of all the departments that has a service delivery problem, it's the school department. I mean, it is absolute chaos for this district to now start up a full-blown high-quality hybrid model, continue the in-school model, and manage to keep everybody safe and meet all the rules of the COVID scenarios that are no doubt going to persist well into next year, in my mind. So I don't know where we would get the money, but it's money that I feel like we don't have to spend right now, and we may have to figure out a way for the next budget cycle how the school department can accomplish the goals with whatever model they want, where they need money to do it. And we could get creative with that at the time. So we need to do something. I don't think we know quite how to tackle it. And I am very, very uncomfortable putting any unnecessary operating budget burdens in place at this point. We may very well be cutting another $2 to $4 million in a hurry. And that could be very difficult. Why make it harder? So that is why I'm going to vote against this. I am maybe artificially concerned about the money, but I think it's real. Thank you.
Thanks, Frank. Anyone else would like to talk on this matter? Sherry.
Thanks, Steve. I didn't know if you meant committee members or anybody else. I didn't want to jump in.
I'll leave my comments to last.
All right, thanks, Steve. I just wanted to say a few words as one of the proponents as well. When I got involved with this warrant article, as Mrs. Monaco said, it was being discussed within the school committee. And at that stage of the game, they felt that they weren't comfortable going forward at town meeting with that. And as hearing from my constituents, my community, about the need for this, and I'm coming at this from the equability end of this, well, that was a big word, in the sense of the pandemic that's happening as well too. There's a lot of inequity going on in and amongst the hybrid, the remote, and all of that, and it's being exacerbated by many different fronts, curriculum-wise, access to all the different things, and this is really critical. And to Mr. Monaco's point, what's going to come next year as far as access that students can have, teachers can have, and that's where my concern is. And I think that as a town meeting member, no, we can't control what the school budgets do. We have bottom line funding, but we do control the money in the sense that I feel this is important enough to put forward this money to give the schools one tool. They can accept this money. They cannot accept this money. From my understanding of town council, it's advisory, as Mr. Eiler said, that yes, they can use it for this, they could use it for something else, but we have commitment from the 5 school committee members that they believe that this is a desired position along with the administration. I don't believe they would, if they took this money, they would use it for something else. This is a tool for that town meeting can give to the schools. They can decide where to go from here. It's accelerating a process that they have committed and they say that they have a desire to do. And that's the reason I'm supporting this, is because I feel as a town meeting member, I don't want to stop a process. The process has been going on for a few years. It's been brought to the forefront of the last few months. And I think as a town meeting member, it's my responsibility to make sure that this process isn't stopped. It continues. They've been discussing it. They have some ideas. Yes, this is outside the box. Something different doesn't mean that it can't be done. So those are my comments I just wanted to add. Thank you.
Thanks, Sherry. I saw Catherine's hand up, but I'm not sure she still wants to talk. Catherine?
Yeah, no, I did have my hand up, and again, Siobhan, every time you do the presentation, I'm all cheering behind you, and again, I think Mr. Eiler, John Eiler, you summed it up. I mean, you've been attending the school committee meetings, and I think you stated things correctly that none of us are against addressing the issue, on the school committee. And I've stated in a couple of the meetings, what my concerns are. And I think it's the process we're going through to push this through. And again, I know there's a sense of urgency, but my concern is, how are we going to budget this and pay for this in the future? We haven't had enough time to discuss that. And, as mentioned, we're being asked to cut $350,000, and now we're being asked to figure out a way to spend another $140 next year, not knowing what deficit we're going to end up with this year, again, with all additional expenses that are unknown as far as the rest of the year for what we may need to spend with the current situation with COVID. So there's so many unknowns right now. And, I personally would prefer that the school committee be allowed to go through the normal process in the budgeting process and discuss it, whether, this director of diversity position is the way to go, if there's another option for us that makes sense, that will help support our students and our teachers to, resolve the issue as best we can. So again, I, support moving forward with something, but I'm not sure this is the right path. I'm all done.
Thanks, Catherine. Any other discussion? Monty?
Oh. Yeah, I guess I'm a little uncomfortable with the budgetary logic that this committee is using. The presentations by the various people on the Ways and Means Committee have talked about how you think it's a good position and something that needs to be done and things like that. And then you've said, well, we really shouldn't use $81,000 this year. And we really should wait and look at next year. And the question I would ask is, if the budget situation next year is in not very good shape, does that mean that this position doesn't happen next year either? Because there seems to be some kind of general assumption that even though the budget will be really bad next year, oh, somehow the school committee will fit in this new position and they will cut 150,000 extra dollars, which could be 2 or 3 teachers or something like that, out of the budget. And somewhere along the line, this committee is going to have to provide money to the school department to put this position in. And right now, there doesn't seem to be the will to actually have that be the responsibility of this committee. Because remember that the school committee doesn't just sort of name a sum of money and get it from us. It's given a cap. It has a cap each year. And I doubt if you folks are going to just take that cap off next year. And so how will the school committee come up with this position next year? That's what the question I would ask you, because none of you seem willing to do anything to make the position happen either this year or next year. And if you're not willing to do anything to provide money to the school committee next year, then we're talking about the position not happening for 2 years, 3 years. So I don't understand exactly what you folks are going to do next year other than to say it's up to the school committee to cut a bunch of other things out so that you can have this position if you want it. Is that what's really being said here?
Phil.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Pearson is operating under a misconception. The Ways and Means Committee is advisory in nature only. None of the decisions that we make, other than transfers from the emergency fund, are under our purview. We only make recommendations. It's up to town meeting to authorize those appropriations. So if town meeting wants to add $1 million or subtract $1 million or 2 million or 5 million, it's your decision only. It has nothing to do with us other than what our recommendation is. And it's a recommendation only, which can be accepted or overridden. So, you know, that's where the decision lies, not with us. And then how it's spent is solely in the purview of the school committee.
You know,
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Monty, real quick, and then I think
Mr. Gallagher, the Ways and Means Committee is hardly just giving its opinion. The town meeting is very, very deferential to the opinion of Ways and Means Committee. And many people will vote based on what you folks recommend. So you're hardly innocent, you know, people on the sideline just kind of raising your hand and letting us know. People look to you for leadership on issues like this. And so if this position is going to become some way in which the town addresses the issue that we all agree exists, the Ways and Means Committee needs to be one of the places where some kind of leadership needs to happen on it.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
I'll go ahead, Sonia.
Mr. Pearsons, you're right. The Ways and Means Committee does have a weight to town meeting. Your comment on where we're talking about it on a financial stance, on a budgetary stance, as opposed to an emotional stance is a hard one for me because that's exactly true. So on an emotional stance, we agree that there's an issue. But the Ways and Means Committee is charged to talk about the budgetary stance. That is our job. Our job is to present to town meeting if we think it's a fiscally responsible thing to do. And the only way we can actually have that conversation is for us to then provide to the body how that would be funded. The warrant article is for $81,000. The school committee is telling you it's $140,000, and they're telling you they're not sure how they would fund the remainder of that. We as a fiscal group are asking them to now cut $350,000. So our dilemma is not on a social stance. Our dilemma is on a fiscal stance. I can tell you, I'll put my other hat on as the chairman of the Burlington Area Chamber of Commerce. The business community is hurting. It's hurting significantly. The restaurant community is hurting. The hospitality industry is hurting. These are numbers that come into our community and have been very good to us for a number of years. We are in trouble. So this one hurts me because on an emotional level, absolutely. But I will tell you, as I said in my last comments, I do not think this is a school department issue by itself. I think this is an issue community-wide, and I think if we're going to embrace it, we should embrace it community-wide from the human resource level. And we should be looking at it as community as a whole. We're taking a stance that diversity is important, that equality is important, and that means we're taking a stance on a full community level. But on a ways and means level, if you're to ask me where we see it, then my opinion is that on a fiscal level, it is, in my opinion, impossible in the September warrant. I would prefer to be talking about it at budget season because then we can holistically talk about it, and we'll also see what happens with free cash. Its comments are. It's a very hard thing for this committee to say, Monty, and I feel bad about that, but it is our job. It is our job to talk about the fiscal side of it. And that's the part that Ways and Means does for the body. The body has to hear if we believe the community can actually financially pull this off without causing a problem for the taxpayers, both business side and residential, because I was on the Board of Selectmen when we instituted a pretty large tax increase. And those phone calls from residents who can't afford it are not pretty. And I'm very mindful of that part. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Tanya. I haven't weighed in on this yet, so I thought since I was in the minority that I would use this opportunity to do so. I too take all the points of Ways and Means and the fiscal responsibility very seriously. I know that this, it's not just Burlington that's hurting, but it's everyone else. But I also know that there's a lot of people that are hurting in other ways, and I sort of see this as an opportunity that's a little bit, out of the box solution. I do agree that it's not just a school issue. It's also a town issue as well, and I certainly would like to not necessarily see it locked into that position. I think the concern I have is that I think Dr. Conti is right in that it is a community effort in that we need the input from a lot of different sources to solve the problem, and that the director model may not necessarily be the right approach to it. But if we can use this as seed money um, to to work the position in such a way that it is acceptable, and it meets the needs of the town, both from the town and the school side, then I think it's would be useful to expend it at this time. The concern I have is that if it is indeed restricted to just a director position in the school, then we could potentially I agree that we would definitely have trouble funding it in the future. But I feel like if we can do something to move us forward in the right direction, that this would be a good time to do that. Any other?
Steve, it's Frank.
Go ahead, Frank.
I just want to address what Monty brought up, which is basically we're hiding. Maybe it feels like we're hiding behind the budget. Monty, in January, guidelines get set, and a major piece of the guideline is what do we think is a sustainable tax increase to plan around, and we set that up last January. And we came in with a must not exceed number, and we're right up against that right now, even with these cuts. So what's going on tonight and with the current budget, which is now 3 months in, is very real. In this coming January, when we plan again, I am expecting, in fact, would demand that however this gets worked out between the town and the school department, HR or shared or schools take it all on, that it's reflected in what they think are the monies needed to operate those departments, and that we as a community, the selectmen, the administration, Ways and Means, we set the guidelines for the levy in accordance with what it'll take to accomplish those things. We may very well have an operating budget next year and a projection of commercial revenues that pushes us into a 6.5% levy. Who knows? And that should include this position if we're going to put our money in our mouth. And I do want to do this. I just think we could be digging ourselves a hole by doing it this way. In fact, I'm sure we are. And I think the way to address this is in a fresh plan with more run rate data on revenues and on the state's position for the cherry sheet and our own appetite for taxes and what the school department is really going to need to operate in the next fiscal year after the experience that they will go through now. I don't know what it'll be, but I would not be surprised if you see me fighting for a 6.5% levy in order to do all these things. And I think the residents would be well served to do that rather than to blow up programs that are so needed, like this one. So the answer to your question about are we hiding behind the budget? I'm not hiding. The budget we've got now, we've got. And what I'm trying to do is duck the guillotine. For the next cycle, we may very well go to the residents and our commercial tax, all our taxpayers, and ask for higher rates in order to accomplish what we feel to be the proper things for services to the community. And this should very well be high on the docket. It's unfortunate that it wasn't higher this year, but that's the way I see it. I'm not ducking this. I want to do this. I just don't want to make an even bigger problem by inadvertently burning up money that we haven't got. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other discussion? I think
I'd like to make some remarks. Thank you to everyone on the committee for the conversation. This is a really important conversation for us to have in the town. From my understanding, this is an unprecedented conversation for unprecedented times. And so I appreciate that. And we take all of your remarks and your guidances regarding potential amendments and the fiscal concerns and the orientation of this committee under full consideration. There are a few things that I would like to put out for consideration also. I am concerned that still at this point in time, given that this request was first made in 2016, so many members of our school community seem to not have a sense for what we need. That is concerning to me. There are many other towns and communities that have this type of position, and there are a lot of people who are willing to partner with towns and to share best practices and lessons learned. It is disappointing that over the summer, when we were working very closely with different members of the community, and there was a lot of opportunity to sort out and iron out details to reduce ambiguity, that wasn't really a proactively embraced opportunity across all members of our community. Regardless of how this vote proceeds here and also next Wednesday, I would hope that all of those people who have a full commitment to this position will reach out to people such as myself. I am an executive committee member of the National NAACP, the Mystic Valley Area Branch. We have robust experience. We have worked with other towns in this space. We're not without resources. So we should find ourselves, if we have gaps of information, being really showing good due diligence and getting the information that we need to take informed decisions in a timely manner. I do not think taking a reactive approach of having guidance councils deployed in an ad hoc fashion as issues arise is a sufficient approach to this type of challenge. I also think the idea that diverse staff is going to work with people and students in our school. The question is, what diverse staff? Our staff is over 95% white. So I think that it's really important that as we understand there are fiscal realities now, and there is discomfort with being overly prescriptive towards the schools, and there's discomfort with deviating from processes, we do have a moral imperative. And this moral imperative is not a new one. And we have been too slow for too long. And we're asking people again to defer this urgent need. We do need to take a tangible step forward. And I do believe this $81,000 investment seed money is a realistic, important, tangible step forward. Dr. Conti has committed and did reaffirm just in the subcommittee meeting that if these funds were given, there would be a commitment to maintain this position moving forward. So I don't think we should frame this as if we get the funds now, and maybe if we can even identify someone, if we can, by January, that it will be a fool's errand. That would not be the worst outcome. The worst outcome was pretty much maintaining our current state. And based upon the conversation so far, that's what we're on track to do. Maintain current state and wait and hope and ask people to keep surviving and persisting under circumstances that are not acceptable for another year, and to hope that money will appear in maybe a more fiscally conservative environment to again remediate the situation. That's not progress.
Thanks, Siobhan. I see a couple more hands up. I don't know if they're leftovers or not. Sherry, Catherine, and Frank.
Sorry, leftover.
Okay, that's fine. Roger.
Would you entertain a motion
Yes, I will definitely entertain a motion
to support the motion as written in the warrant?
Do I have a second?
Second for the purpose of a vote.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Point of clarification, Mr. Chairman. So what is the source of funding?
The source of funding right now is, we haven't made a decision on what the source of funding is. So there's two sources of funding that are available to us. That one would be stabilization, which would be a 2/3 vote, and then the other would be raise and appropriate.
Well, your motion will have to have a source, Mr. Chairman, so I would suggest you put free cash or stabilization on the main motion you submit to the moderator.
Free cash is not available.
Yeah, I don't
Free cash is not available because it's not certified.
All right, I'll change my motion to fund from raise and appropriate, to fund Article 7 from raise and appropriate.
Do I have a second?
Again, I'll second for purposes of a vote.
Thanks, Phil. Any further discussion? Seeing none?
I have a question, Steve.
Sure.
So I see two things here with this article. One is putting aside some money to address the issues that have been discussed, and then the other is the notion of a particular position, a director of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm just wondering if, I sort of heard the idea that we could provide the funding and then deal with how it should be used as the schools kind of figure out the best way to do this. Is that really what we're saying, or are we saying we're putting in, the money and it's got to go for this particular position? I'm not sure.
So the warrant article is for a position of director, equity, and inclusion, and the town council has said that the recommendation is advisory, and the school council has said that it would mandate that this funding be spent for that particular position, and that it couldn't be spent if I'm understanding that correctly, it couldn't be spent in a different capacity. So if if the school council is the right source for that, then this would be for a director level position.
Okay. So it would be kind of a firm direction.
I think that would be either Dr.
This
Conti or
director level.
school or Eric. I'm sorry, or Christine.
Would you like me to respond, Steve?
Please.
School council has told us that given the wording of the article, we can decide, if it passes, we can decide whether or not to spend the money, but we can only spend it on the dictates of the warrant article. So it could only be spent on a director level position for this purpose, unless the warrant article is amended to allow something different. But as it stands right now, we can only spend it, according to our attorney, on the director position.
Thanks. Does that answer your question, Mike?
Yes, it does. I mean, it seems a little maybe more rigid than, would be, I think it would be more palatable if it was not stated that way, I guess.
Right. So the proponents could take that feedback and amend it going forward, but I think what we're voting on tonight is what we have in the warrant.
Okay.
Steve, could I ask a question or
Yeah, real
a
quick.
statement?
Real quick.
As you stated in the back of the warrant, is our town council's opinion that it's advisory only. So I don't know, as you say, two lawyers in the room, 3 opinions. So I don't know who would rule on that, but it is advisory according to our town council, so that the school would have the authority to do with it as they would. So I just wanted to make that statement.
I see one last hand with PAO 859. I'm not sure who that is.
Hi, Patricia O'Brien, thank you. I just want to underscore that if we can't do that, we can't find a way to make our budget or make a recommendation that our budget and our money aligns with our values. It's clear to me that everyone in the community recognizes this as an issue and an issue that we need to deal with. And I think we all believe in our students and our children, and a lot of change and hope for our future comes from them. And that's why I think this position is rightly situated in the school department. But if we can't get there tonight for that reason, if you can't find a way to support it from the humanitarian perspective and from the real need, I'd like you to really consider the liability issue. For several years now, the school department has been trying to make this change. We all believe in each other as humans. We all want to do the right thing. But the issues that we have are very deep and very systemic. We just have to look around our screen tonight and know that. We're really, the minority voices, the underrepresented communities are truly underrepresented. They're underrepresented in this forum right now. It's one of the reasons I'm a proponent. But again, if you can't get there tonight, because we're all on a journey to get there, look at it from a liability perspective in 2 ways. Imagine you're one of those students who stood up on the common and revealed all the secrets that you carried. And then imagine that you have a sibling in the schools or a cousin in the schools. And then imagine that you talk to your friends, and there's 5 or there's 10 of you who said, I let my heart bleed on that comment. And the schools had an opportunity to make a change. And the town had an opportunity to make the change. And they didn't. We say no, and then imagine they decide to find themselves some lawyers. This $81,000 will look like nothing. It will look like nothing. Might be even why we didn't entertain Article 6 tonight. because $100,000 would get us nowhere in an environmental liability situation. So $81,000 is nothing. Beyond a lawsuit, as a community, once we're on the other side of this COVID, we're gonna want our community to be a place where businesses want to come back to. Look at the NFL, look at the NBA, look at Coca-Cola. You can't even watch a television ad without it being as diverse as they possibly can make it. We need to send the message that our community is diverse, we embrace diversity, we're inclusive. When this community says no, whether it's the school department, which obviously has failed to be able to make it a priority over the past few years, but if this community says no, it sends not only a message to our kids, it sends a message to the world and the communities around us. And businesses, global businesses, will look and reconsider if we don't actually put our money where our mouth is. Thanks.
Thanks. Okay, so I have a motion and it's seconded. I'm ready for a roll call.
So is the motion raise and appropriate?
That's the motion I made.
The motion is raise and appropriate.
And nobody can amend the specific wording about it must be a director?
We can't do that.
The town meeting can, I think, but I don't think we can.
Okay.
Why not? We can't modify.
I don't think that's a prudent thing to do without the proponents being in agreement. And I don't think we should try to do that in real time.
Yeah, I think we should move forward with what we have. That's what's been put forward.
Mr. Chairman, if I can just add, I agree with you that the wording can't be changed right before a vote, but I would ask the proponents to consider that before town meeting.
I think I would agree with that. Thank you, Sonia. Okay, Brad Bond.
For the reasons that John Eiler outlined, I'm voting no.
Dave Tate.
No.
Doug Davidson. Did you say no? Oh, you did. I heard a no. Okay, Frank.
No.
Jay Cherie.
I support yes.
John.
No.
Mike Hardy.
Yes.
Phil.
No.
Rob.
Yes.
Roger.
Yes.
Sonia.
No.
No. I voted yes. We have 5 in favor, 7 opposed, and no abstains. Did I miss anyone? Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Just a note, Steve, don't go back to the captioning to try to capture the vote. It did not agree with what you said.
No, I do not go. I have a spreadsheet that's up here. I need to do it so that way it tallies and I can just read it rather than counting the numbers, which is why it was a little bit slower. I'll get the hang of it.
Oh, that's good. I just wanted to point out that the captioning is not very accurate.
No, actually, it's kind of distracting because a lot of the words don't match up with what's actually being said. So,
right.
In any case,
The chairmanship, Steve.
What's that?
Welcome to the chairmanship.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the warm welcome. So the last thing on the agenda was meeting minutes, and that would be from the July 15th meeting. I forwarded that a week and a half ago. Did anyone have any changes, or I'll entertain a motion?
I'm not sure I ever got those.
You didn't get those? I sent them with the agenda for the meeting. Is anybody else in that same predicament?
I'm sorry, Steve, I didn't read them.
No, neither did I.
I'll take a motion to postpone till the next meeting.
Motion to postpone the minute approval, please?
You need a motion for that? Can't you just let it, we'll come back to it?
I don't think so. I will resend the meeting minutes tonight, and then it'll be in front of us for the next meeting.
Thank you. My apologies, Steve.
No, in a nutshell, it boiled down to the reorganization and also the commemoration for the work that both Diane and Susan did on this whole subcommittee. That was the bulk of the meeting, but I will defer that to the.
Yeah, so Steve, just a point of information.
Sure.
When are you expecting a next meeting? I wouldn't think it would be for quite some time.
It would probably be sometime in December.
Yeah. So if you send the minutes out tonight, they'll all get lost for sure.
Yeah, I will definitely resend them, but I'm concerned because if you guys got the agenda and the warrants from me, then the meeting minutes disappeared. I see a subplot here.
I'm guessing I just forgot to open the second attachment.
I'll make it the first attachment the next time. Maybe I'll
We have a
call,
short attention span.
I could call a meeting just for the approval of minutes, but I don't think I'd be popular.
And would have to do minutes on the minutes.
Minutes on, oh yeah, it's a recurring task.
Hey, Steve, I just checked, and yes, you did attach the minutes to the announcement on September 9th. So
Okay, there's a lot of
it
times.
did go out.
There are a lot of times I forget the attachments, so I'm glad this was not one of them. So I'll take an important motion to adjourn.
Wait.
Oh, sorry, wait, Roger.
That was Roger. I have a question, and maybe, unfortunately, our financial team has left because I didn't ask it earlier. So maybe Town Hall 1 has the answer. There were we passed quite a number of warrant articles in May for capital expenditures. What is the administration's position on spending that money? Executing those projects? Are they withholding any of them? Are they
Frank, you're on mute. I know that we didn't tackle it on our last meeting. It wasn't on our agenda. So I did not have a direct conversation with it. Frank may know more. Frank, you're still on mute.
I believe there's any policy that says to hold out. So we don't really know.
Frank, you missed half of it, so can you start over?
Okay, we didn't ask, but I do know that some of the articles have been executed. So there was no policy issued that I know of to delay warrant articles. It doesn't mean that it still couldn't be done, and we'd need to ask Mr. Sagarino about that, or John. However, all that's going to do is take your put money back at. Well, first of all, you'd have to vote on. Geez, I don't know what you'd have to do, but all it can do is make more free cash.
Right. No, I thought I remembered from discussions in May and prior to voting in the budget in May was that one of the options for conserving free cash was to hold off on expending the money until the situation cleared up. And then you're right, to move that money somewhere else, it would take a vote of town meeting to rescind them or whatever.
And the specifics on that, I only remember around things like OPEB, very specifically, not warrant articles.
Okay. That's fine.
I thought in some of the discussions, because we did talk about with some of the capital expenditures, some of the large equipment purchases and so forth, I thought there was some commitment on the town side to hold off until January on a lot of those expenses and see where we are. So we were kind of reassured that we would be, that even though we budgeted the money, if it looked like the money might not be there, a lot of those things could be held off until the spring for actual purchase. So
actually, Doug, not to talk over you, but I do have a vague memory around some of the DPW stuff. That being said, but I also know, for example, around the Council on Aging Uber training, that's been executed. So it's not across the board.
And that would have to be executed, I believe, because we're going to get rid of the funding in January for the BCAT, or for the Beeline service.
But does it really matter? I mean, it would be nice to know, but from my point of view, it's $2 million. Let's say half of it could still be held out. So there's another $1 million you could put into free cash. But is that really something that we should stop that freight train? I mean, those were carefully picked items, and I would say leave it alone.
It was a question of where, where we were today, not suggesting any change.
Well, we should ask and maybe put it in an email out to the committee, not for debate, but just informative.
I can follow up with John and get the answers to those questions and send out the email.
I think we should just leave it, remain encumbered until we get a better feel for what's going on. I think they can release it back to free cash if they wish to without a vote. However, if any other use of the money would have to have a town meeting vote.
Yep. Well, and given that we have $10 million in free cash, there's no need to raise that number at the moment because we seem unwilling to spend it. So I don't agree with you, Frank, on that. But anyway, let's see if you want to adjourn. Do you still want a motion to adjourn?
Only if you guys really want to adjourn. Otherwise, we could spend the rest of the night on this call.
That's okay. I move to adjourn.
I'll take it on.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Over. Thank you very much.
Nice job, Steve.
See you all.
Thank you, Steve.
See you guys
Well
next
done,
week.
Steve. Take care,
Guys,
everyone.
at town meeting. Take care.